There is a stretch of sea covering nearly 27,000 square kilometers, more than twice the size of Qatar, lying quietly in the Gulf of Thailand. On a map, it appears to be nothing more than an ordinary patch of blue, but beneath those calm waters, many believe there rests an energy treasure worth billions of dollars, vast natural gas reserves, and significant oil deposits capable of reshaping a economic future of an entire nation. It is this very patch of sea that has kept Thailand and Cambodia locked in a strategic standoff for decades. And remarkably, this dispute did not begin with warships or gunfire, but with a few lines drawn across a map. The story begins with a geographical paradox known as the Gulf of Thailand. Compared to the South China Sea, it is not particularly vast. Yet it carries immense strategic importance because it lies enclosed between four nations: Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, and Malaysia. Viewed from above, it resembles a tightly packed maritime basin where neighboring countries are forced to compete for space. 5. Under the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, each coastal state is entitled to establish an exclusive economic zone extending up to 200 nautical miles from its coastline. In theory, the rule sounds clear and fair. In reality, the Gulf of Thailand makes that principle extraordinarily difficult to apply. In some parts of the Gulf, the distance between opposing coastlines is only a few dozen kilometers. That means if every country claimed the full 200 nautical miles, those maritime claims would inevitably overlap. And that is where the problem begins. When overlapping claims occur, international law generally recommends drawing a median line, a line where every point is equidistant from the coastlines of the two countries involved. On paper, this seems perfectly logical, but geography in the real world is rarely as neat as mathematical formulas. Take the coastlines of Thailand and Cambodia. Thailand possesses more than 3,000 kilometers of coastline, with over 1,800 kilometers directly facing the Gulf of Thailand. Its coast stretches wide and outward like an extended arm reaching into the sea. Cambodia, by contrast, has only around 500 kilometers of coastline, and the section facing the Gulf is even shorter. Its coast also curves inward, forming a concave shape. This difference lies at the heart of the dispute. If a strict median line were drawn, the boundary would shift significantly toward Cambodia. Imagine two people standing opposite one another, but one stretches their arms much farther than the other. The midpoint naturally moves closer to the person with the shorter reach. For Cambodia, this would mean losing thousands of square kilometers of potentially resource-rich waters. Thailand argues that the median line approach is objective, transparent, and fully consistent with international law. Cambodia disagrees. Phnom Penh argues that fairness does not always mean a mechanical 50-50 split. International legal precedents often take into account special geographic circumstances, including coastline shape, relative coastal length, and historical usage to achieve what courts call an equitable solution. And so, two competing interpretations of fairness have created an overlapping maritime claim of roughly 27,000 square kilometers. If this disputed zone contained only fish and seawater, the issue might have been resolved long ago. But what makes this dispute so sensitive is what lies beneath the seabed. Geological studies suggest the area may contain tens of billions of cubic meters of natural gas, along with commercially viable oil reserves. For Thailand, which relies heavily on natural gas to generate electricity, these reserves represent an opportunity to strengthen energy security and reduce dependence on imports. For Cambodia, the stakes may be even greater. As a developing nation with rapidly rising energy demand and limited domestic production, access to these reserves could become a transformative economic breakthrough. In other words, every square kilometer of this disputed sea is not just water. It is money, it is energy, it is leverage, it is future prosperity. Yet the story becomes even more complicated because of one small island, Koh Kut, located in Thailand's Trat province. Koh Kut sits only about 25 to 30 kilometers from Cambodia's coastline, covering more than 100 square kilometers, with permanent residents, tourism infrastructure, and reliable freshwater sources. It qualifies as a fully recognized island under international maritime law. At first glance, that may seem insignificant, but in maritime boundary law, such an island can dramatically alter calculations. If Thailand uses Koh Kut as a full base point for drawing the median line, the maritime boundaries shift sharply toward Cambodia, 5. Potentially depriving Phnom Penh of thousands more square kilometers of valuable waters. Cambodia does not dispute Thai sovereignty over Koh Kut. However, it argues that the island's legal effect on maritime delimitation should be reduced, or even ignored altogether to preserve equity. Thus, a single island, just over 100 square kilometers in size, could determine the fate of a maritime zone hundreds of times larger. Faced with this deadlock, both countries have explored a more practical solution, a joint development area, often known as a JDA. The idea is simple: set aside the sovereignty dispute temporarily, jointly exploit the resources, and share the profits. This approach is not unprecedented. Several countries around the world have adopted similar arrangements when unable to settle maritime boundaries. It is like two people discovering gold beneath disputed land. If they continue arguing over ownership, neither gains anything. But if they mine it together and split the proceeds, both benefit. It sounds reasonable. Yet the details are anything but simple. How should profits be divided? Who would oversee operations? Who would sign contracts with multinational energy companies? 5. Who would bear environmental and legal liabilities? And 5, and perhaps most importantly, how could any agreement be framed in a way acceptable to both domestic publics? These unanswered questions have kept negotiations stalled for years. What is particularly striking is that despite its enormous economic value, 5. This maritime dispute has remained relatively calm compared to many territorial conflicts elsewhere. There have been no military escalations. 5. No naval confrontations, no dramatic shows of force. The reason is straightforward. Both Bangkok and Phnom Penh understand that open conflict would cost far more than any potential energy gain. 5. Resources beneath the seabed only create value when extracted in peace. And so, this 27,000 square kilometer zone has become something unusual. It is not merely a territorial dispute. It is a test of diplomatic maturity. It raises a much larger question for modern geopolitics. Can nations transform conflict into cooperation? Because in today's world, 5. Real strength is no longer measured solely by how much territory a country controls. 5. It is measured by its ability to convert disagreement into shared opportunity. To this day, the maritime boundary between Thailand and Cambodia in the Gulf of Thailand remains unfinished. The overlapping claim still sits there, a question mark on Southeast Asia's map. 5. But perhaps the final answer will not come down to who wins and who loses. Instead, it may depend on whether these two nations can find the political courage to shake hands and turn a disputed sea into a symbol of regional 5. Cooperation, because sometimes the greatest victory in geopolitics is not gaining more land or more water. It is finding a way for no one to lose while everyone stands to gain. Thank you for following this story. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it. For now, this is goodbye. Thank you for staying with Societale Stories.